And that set the stage for Game 7, 4 for 5, 2 homers, 5 RBIs, MVP. I wrote it. This guy now must be considered a superstar in the sport. And I got some comments back. 824 OPS, only ranked 20. Stop it, guys. Stop it. You don't have to be in the top 10 OPS to be a superstar. And yes, he's a flawed player in some ways, even though he's a brilliant five-tool talent. Adolis Garcia, dude of the week, superstar in the sport.
Let's kick off some World Series talk. That was from Fair Territory, and we'll talk more about the show after we talk to Ken. Kratz and Todd Father, I wanted to kick off the combo here. Can you give us a grade for Ken, 1 to 10, on how his troll impression was of people that are trying to tell Ken Adolis Garcia is not good at ball? 10. 10.
10.
Ken, I laughed out loud. I was at home. I think I was making some food, and I'm listening to Fair Territory, and I cracked up. I was like, that's the same voice I use for someone that throws a number at me that's like just with an agenda.
Well, Scott, it seems every time I open my mouth or write something, I hear commentary from people that is not exactly pleasant. And that's all part of it. I get it. And people have a right to their opinions, and they have a right to express their opinions. They have vehicles to express their opinions. But I'm going to occasionally strike back too. And I did see a comment on the article saying, yeah, it's OPS, whatever that was. And I just thought it was ridiculous and kind of missed the point. So, yeah, I did my troll impression for the day.
Okay, I'll be careful what I say here. I don't want Ken to make fun of me. Ken, what do you think are the biggest storylines of both? What do you think the biggest storylines for both teams are moving into this World Series for them to tip the scales in their favor?
Eric, I would never make fun of this question. It's the question that we all have right now, right? Biggest storylines, I would say, number one, how do the Rangers handle the Diamondbacks running game? The Rangers took great strides or made great strides in improving their control of the running game this year. I think last year they were 25th in caught stealing percentage. This year they were 5th. So that's a dramatic improvement. It's something they stressed from day one of spring training. So that's one. Another one to me is the Rangers lineup. And you guys were talking about this a bit in the previous segment, if I'm not mistaken. 1 through 9, they're really good. And they have players who can hurt you at any time. Now, not everyone has been hot at the same time. Of course, that rarely happens in baseball. But if they get going a little bit offensively, like they can and have in the past, then it's a real problem for the Diamondbacks. But we just saw in the NLCS, the Diamondbacks get down 2 games in which they were outscored 15-3 and then come back to win 4 of the next 5. So if you're watching, if you're paying attention, to discount this team would be a big mistake. I'm not going to discount them. I am actually looking forward to seeing how this all plays out. When I say actually, I mean in the sense that a lot of people are, this is not a great matchup. No, actually, it's a fun matchup, and it's different. We have different teams in, and people complain all the time. Too much Yankees, too much Red Sox, too much Astros, too much Dodgers, etc., etc. Here you have 2 different teams, 2 quite interesting teams. If you're a fan of baseball, and I said this on my show, then you should be watching. And I'm not saying that as a representative of Fox. I'm saying that as a fan of baseball. This is fun. This is what we look forward to all season long, so let's have at it.
All right, yeah, that's well said, dude. I'm right there with you. So for me, what we've been talking about, we're talking about edges. Who has the edge here? Who has the edge there? I'm curious your thoughts on pitching, on hitting. You already talked about speed and running and all that stuff with the Diamondbacks. All of a sudden, the last 2 games they played, they've come to life stealing bases. So who has the edge pitching? Who has the edge hitting?
Rotation, it all depends on Gallen. He has not been good this postseason, really, by his standards. And the Rangers have 2 hot pitchers right now, Eovaldi and Montgomery. Gallen and Merrill Kelly certainly can be that. They're good enough to be that. And I really liked what I saw from Brandon Pfaadt in Game 7. To me, a kid on that stage with his stuff, doing what he did was really impressive. So the Rangers are a bit problematic past the top 2. We know that. We'll see how Max is. And that's a big storyline of this series. Again, how Max Scherzer is going to pitch. Bullpens, you probably give the Diamondbacks a little bit of an edge. They have a greater number of relievers that their manager trusts, I would say, than the Rangers do. But guys, we talk about these things before series all the time, and they never play out the way we expect. So I'm looking forward to watching how this all unfolds. And tonight should be telling because it's Evaldi who's been brilliant in this postseason against Gallen, who has not. And it's a time where Gallen really has to kind of reestablish himself. Not that he is declining in quality or anything like that, but he just has not pitched well of late.
So I want to ask you about Diamondbacks roster construction. I think they're by far the more surprising team to be there, even though the win totals weren't like crazy apart and the Rangers were a wild card. I think when you look at the talent on the roster and the slip they had for a few weeks when guys were hurt, I can understand. And I'm not like looking up going, I can't believe the Rangers in the World Series. For the Diamondbacks, I am. You explained on Fair Territory some fun back and forth that you've had with the Diamondbacks front office about how they don't want to get any national credit. Leave us alone. Let's just do our thing, be quiet, and then show up in the World Series, us against the world. So my question to you is, when you look at their roster construction and some of the trades that they've made, going all the way back to like Ketel Marte, who seems like the right star for them and he's affordable for them. Which ones stand out to you? And I don't know if they've mentioned to you any that they're super proud of, because I know you covered this in the Athletic windup this morning. But when I look back, I'm like, damn, they've won a lot of trades.
Yes, and it's interesting the way the two teams were built. Now, both lost 100 games 2 years ago. There have only been 4 other teams in history to lose 100 and then get to the World Series 2 years later. So we have that aspect of the matchup as well. It's astonishing, really, and it gives hope to a lot of teams maybe that have lost 100 or close to it in recent years. It doesn't have to take forever. What is interesting to me about that is that they've done it in 2 completely different ways. The Rangers in the past 2 off seasons have spent more than $800 million on free agents. They were very aggressive at the deadline, adding Jordan Montgomery and Max Scherzer and Chris Stratton. The Diamondbacks have mostly been built, Scott, as you kind of alluded to, through shrewd drafting and trading. Corbin Carroll was the number 16 pick overall in 2019. 16. That was a great draft, admittedly, and some really good players went above him. But the 16th pick, if you had a redraft right now, he'd probably be in the top 3. So that's one area where they've really excelled. Alec Thomas, they've got a number of homegrown guys. Fott is another one. They've also made, as you mentioned, some shrewd trades. Ketel Marte was an interesting trade at the time, remains interesting to this day. If you remember, Haniger and Segura went to Arizona. Ketel Marte and Taijuan Walker those guys went to Seattle. Taijuan and Ketel went to Arizona. Worked out well for them. They've done some other things as well. The Gabriel Moreno trade with Luis Gurriel. That has worked out really well, at least in year 1. I still think Dalton Varsho is going to be a good player for Toronto, but this year, no question, win for the Diamondbacks. Zach Gallen for Jazz Chisholm. We can go right down the line. And it's been a lot of that with them. Paul Sewald was another trade that they made at the deadline. That's kind of how they've done it. They've got Corbin Carroll on a $111 million extension, Marte on a $76 million extension. Those are their biggest contracts. Their one big free agent in recent years was released. That's Madison Bumgarner. So from that aspect alone, it's really interesting to see these teams kind of clash in this way because they are different. Now, the Rangers have Josh Young and Evan Carter and Leody Taveras. These are homegrown guys themselves, but it's not quite the same bent as Arizona.
So you're classifying this as the build versus rebuild series?
They were both rebuilds. They just rebuilt a little bit differently. And Texas was very, very aggressive and will remain aggressive, I believe, in the years to come. They play in a pretty big market. The Diamondbacks do too. People forget this. It's not a big market by baseball standards. I don't really understand why. But Phoenix is one of the 10 biggest cities in the United States. It just, by baseball standards, is a low revenue market. They don't spend like the Rangers do. The Diamondbacks had a bottom 3rd payroll. The Rangers were, I believe, top 6, something like that. So that's a difference in the way these two teams have operated.
Is there a chance we see Evan Longoria getting benched in this series? Because the games that he's moved to DH, they've kind of downgraded their defense. And I understand, it's a lefty on the mound, but we're going to see Montgomery at least twice in this series, if not a Game 7 Montgomery. It seems like how he's been producing isn't in step with how the rest of the team's been producing. And when he's DHing, there's a downgrade in right field with Tommy Pham dealing with that turf toe.
Yeah, certainly, Eric, they can play it that way, and it would not shock me to see Evan Longoria not play a major role. It's kind of the way it's been in many ways. Torey Lovello has basically done what he felt is best or feels is best for the lineup. And we saw that in the NLCS when he did bench Tommy Pham in game 5 in favor of Pavin Smith. Tommy Pham comes back in game 6, hits a home run. One thing that happened during the Diamondbacks 7-25 slide is that Lovello got more aggressive, for lack of a better term, in confronting his players, in holding them more accountable, both publicly and privately. And some Diamondbacks people feel that was kind of a key to them coming out of it. That he finally said, hey, enough's enough. We have to do certain things a certain way. They were making too many outs on the bases, just kind of screwing up in a lot of different ways. So, given that, and given that he has kind of taken a step forward in that accountability aspect, I don't expect him to do anything but what he feels is best for this team.
Okay, so one more kind of.
You go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Todd.
No. You're right. Go. You're up.
Okay. I just had one more big picture World Series question for you, Ken. So I think the Rangers have star power. I think the complaints wouldn't have been there, obviously, if the Phillies were in, but even we could have picked other teams, of course, Atlanta, LA, etc. I don't think the complaints are I think, Evaldi and Montgomery are known, and Adolis Garcia certainly made himself known now, and Corey Seager's been a star and had one of the best seasons this year. I'm just wondering if there's any way that the marketability of a team like the Diamondbacks can improve, and your thoughts on why the attention isn't there. Does it have to do more with the market, or do you go player by player? Corbin Carroll is a star, but he's pretty reserved and quiet, and he's a rookie. It's his first season. We'll see how he, kind of expresses his personality going forward. I'm just kind of looking at the roster being what's here? What can we highlight? What can people attach themselves to if they don't really have a horse in this race and they don't care? I don't know if you've seen anything on that front. Because for me, Zach Gallen stands out. It's been one of the better pitchers in the league for a while. He's one of our best interviews when we bring him on here. He threw all kinds of shade on social to fans in Philadelphia. So, why can't we elevate him?
No reason. He's going to be a top 5 Cy Young finisher, I expect, this year. And he is a star. Corbin Carroll is certainly a star. Ketel Marte is a star. He's been an all-star. Now, these are not guys who are in the national consciousness necessarily. Arizona plays in the West, and a lot of people in the East don't see these teams enough because they play later at night. It's simple reality. But those are really good players, the 3 we just mentioned. And you've got others like Alec Thomas who are kind of coming on, and Christian Walker has been one of the better players in the league for a while now. He'll be highlighted, I'm sure, in this World Series. So when you talk about a star, there are all kinds of ways or paths to stardom. And obviously the best players are stars naturally, but the better players in the bigger markets, they get more attention. Perhaps being in the World Series will change that some for the Diamondbacks. It certainly should. And the other thing that I like about this, Scott, is while they don't have big superstars per se, even though Carroll probably fits into that category now, the beauty of this team is it's a team. And they have combined and bonded as a group and played a certain way without fear that has gotten to this point. So I admire them for what they've done. We all value teams so greatly, right? We all like the idea of a team coming together and achieving perhaps more than they thought it could. So that's who the Diamondbacks are, and there's nothing to be ashamed about with that.
Now, Dusty Baker, I want to skip gears here to him. Played for him. You know him very well. Hall of Fame, historic career. One of my mentors, a guy that's been doing it for a long time, years and years and years as a player, as a manager, Hall of Famer now, of course. Talk to us a little bit about him. Any funny stories you got with him? Just stuff over the years where something you're like, you know what, this guy is just class act, and it's a story I'll tell from here on out.
I've got 2. And a couple of years ago, actually it was about 5 years ago now, Todd, 2017, 18, in that range, 17 it must have been. I was in need of back surgery, and I was kind of hunched over when I was walking. Not greatly. It was kind of slight, but somebody who knew me would have noticed it. Hardly anyone in baseball noticed it. One day in Washington, when Dusty Baker was managing the Nationals, walks to the end of the dugout. I'm in the photo pit adjoining the dugout. And he says, this is in the middle of the game. He goes, hey, man, what's wrong with you? What's going on, man? And I explained to him that I had this back condition. I had scoliosis as a kid, had surgery, need more surgery to kind of straighten myself up again. And the fact that he noticed it to me in the middle of a game, came up to me and talked about this, it just kind of speaks to who Dusty is. He's a very empathetic person. He is observant, as unbelievably so. That stood out to me. And then the following year, I guess by that point he was out as manager and working for the Giants as a scout. I had had the surgery February 15th and was out for like 5 weeks. My first time out of the house basically was to interview Dusty in Annapolis, Maryland. I live in New Jersey. My wife had to drive me to Annapolis because I still wasn't 100%. And I sat down with Dusty for an hour. We had lunch. And I just kind of wanted to pick his brain on different issues in the sport. Things were bugging me about the sport, and I wanted to ask him about it because he always has such a good sensibility about all that is going on. So I did the interview, and when I was done with the interview, it was an hour long. And I thought, I don't know, man. I don't know if I have enough here. I don't know if this is any good. It was kind of all over the place. And then I transcribed the tape, and he was brilliant. I didn't realize it at the time, but when you put it all together, it was brilliant. And it was one of the better read things I've done for The Athletic. People loved it because he just had such unusual, original insights into different issues in the game. So those are my two favorite Dusty stories. And also, it was just cool last year to see him finally get over the hump and finally win a World Series after all the heartbreak in the playoffs and all that he had gone through. You can name a number of times where he was so close. So he's someone who is legendary in this game. He's someone who means a lot to all of us who are in the media or any way associated with sport. And I just love the guy. I had a great positive relationship with him, but pretty much everyone did.
He's an honest guy. He's connected. He makes that connection, and that speaks volumes. So for you to say that about him, that just goes step in step with what other people say about him. But we're going to go to somebody who maybe has not always been the most honest, and sometimes I can't stand anonymous sources. I can't stand, but I get it. That's part of that's part of how you have to write stories. That's how you have to get information, because not everybody wants their information out there. But I know somebody was kind of clapping back at you quietly saying, oh, these anonymous sources about this and that about my organization. And it all comes to light that these people were correct, that the Padres, there was a disconnect. Can we, as a Padres fan, ever believe what A.J. Preller says? A.J. Preller, who has gone through 6 managers in 10 years, can we believe him from here on out?
I don't know that I would go that far, Eric, and I'll give you the background on this. I wrote a story with Dennis Lin of The Athletic about the Padres, came out September 19th. And there were a lot of anonymous sources. There were people who detailed the problems with the organization, how there were many issues going on, one of which was the relationship between Bob Melvin, the manager, and A.J. Preller, the GM. And one player who asked to remain anonymous said their relationship was unfixable. Then the Padres, of course, missed the playoffs. A.J. Preller holds his end-of-season news conference, as most GMs do, and says Bob Melvin's going to be back. He's our manager. And he also says, and I don't put much credit in reports with unnamed sources, etc. That's fine. You don't have to put much credibility on those reports, but it turned out that that relationship was unfixable. And how do we know? We know because the Padres let Bob Melvin go with 1 year left on his contract to take a job with the San Francisco Giants, who gave him a 3-year deal. That's how we know. If the relationship is so good, Bob Melvin is back, and he's back to fulfill the final year of his contract with a team that should be quite good. And the only reason I said anything is because when you try to discredit what we do, and listen, we're not perfect either, but when you go out there publicly and say, you don't put much credibility in this stuff, and then what happens is what we reported, I'm sorry, that needs to be called out.
Yep,
feel like
agreed.
Do you feel like there should be an apology, Ken? Do you feel like
No,
that's
no,
or no? No,
that's,
not like that.
No, Paul. I don't operate like that. And listen,
Yeah.
a few years ago, I'll be upfront about this. I reported that the Max Scherzer trade was close to the Padres. Didn't turn out to be true, and I had to wear it. And AJ Preller handled that professionally with me, and we sort of joke about it from time to time. It wasn't good at the time. It wasn't good at all. One of the low points of my career, to be perfectly honest. But these things happen, and we go forward. There's no need for an apology or anything like that. But I felt when he said that, okay, if you're bringing Bob Melvin back, okay, and the relationship improves, all power to you. But as I wrote, actions speak louder than words, and the actions were clear here.
And anonymous sources are awesome because sometimes they'd be fired if they actually put their name on it. So
well,
we need that.
Here's all right. I know a lot of people like Eric don't like anonymous sources. I don't blame them. I'd much rather have people on the record at all times. But sometimes, because matters are so sensitive, people are not willing to speak on the record. And if you want to get at what is going on, you have to use anonymous sources. And you have to be careful because people have agendas, and sometimes they're operating from a position of that kind of thing. But at the same time, anonymous sources are necessary often to get to the bottom of a particular issue.
I'm with you. Ken, awesome. Well stated. And thank you. And have fun. Enjoy the night.
I'm sure we will, man. Thanks.
Thank you. And Fair Territory's out there right now. Our FT insider, Ken Rosenthal, talking about the series, of course, more on this San Diego story and a lot more with Grill and Ken on a number of topics. Be right back.